I celebrate myself and sing myself. And what I assume, you shall assume for every atom belonging to me, every atom belonging to me, as good belongs to you. Those words begin the poem, Song of Myself, by Walt Whitman, that first poet of American democracy. It's a poem that encompasses both the celebration of the individual voice and the sharing of it with the community, so that we may all understand that though we are individuals, we are all part of one another, even down to the atomic level. Welcome to another edition of Voices on the Green, where we continue the tradition of creating a common space here, where Lexingtonians and others can be seen and heard. In Voices on the Green, we take a theme and we explore it in several ways. We explore it through music, through personal story, and also we have the perspective of experts, usually. And tonight, because even though we won't have an expert speaker, we will have expert speakers, people who are experts in the understanding of what it means to belong. You will hear many different varied stories about belonging and what does it mean to be part of a community. This human impulse that poet John O'Donohue points out is driven by both being and longing, the longing of our being. And dare I say that we are all again experienced in that. The majority of our speakers will be telling a story for the first time to an audience of this size. They may have whispered it before to maybe relatives or to friends and other loved ones, but tonight they have a couple of hundred people who are going to be hearing what is in the deepest recesses of their heart. So tonight, they will share it with you, strangers who will become friend and family. So if you will, whenever we call their names or welcome them up here, please, you welcome them up here enthusiastically. To do that, that means once their name is called, you clap like crazy till they get firmly behind the microphone. And give them a couple of seconds for them to settle themselves, and then that would be your way of opening your arms to welcome them into the community. So, the thing that makes us feel part of the community is that we always like to give back to the community. And tonight we're also sharing the proceeds, as we often do, with a community partner, someone that you'll hear from later. This is Lex, a rapper, and we will have the director come up and speak to you about that at the second half of the show. And what better way is it to speak and to welcome than with song? To wit, it is my pleasure to introduce a new voice into our community. Nate Ramsey was born in Minnesota, is a professional singer living here in the Boston area. He performs regularly with the Boston Symphony Orchestra and also the Boston Pops. He's also a singer here at First Parish. This is his first time opening up to this community outside of the church. So if you will, welcome, singing, waving through a window, Nate Ramsey.
Step out of the sun, because you learn, because you there's nobody around, you never really crash or even make a sound. When you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? When you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? When you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? Did I even make a sound? Did I even make a sound? It's like I never made a sound. Never make a sound.
Will return later to bless us with more of his voice, and he will have a couple of songs that he will lead us in toward the end of the program. And that song he just sang, Waving Through the Window, is from Dear Evan Hansen. And if you've ever seen it, then you'll know it's about students who are all seeking a way of belonging to a place in that, let's just say that often minefield-laden joint we call high school. Some of us still bear the scars out there. And it's interesting because the next two stories that we have are going to be about students. And so when we were a student trying to figure out what it means to belong. The first storyteller who is coming to the stage is Simon Andrews. He was born in England. He is a composer and conductor, and he is proudly married to the minister of this church. So every day he wakes up pinching himself, wondering how the hell he got so lucky. So, if you will, to the stage, welcome Simon Andrews.
My parents left school at the age of 16. If you know England in the 1950s, that piece of information alone is enough to tell you that they were working class. My grandfather, my mother's father, left school at 14 and went to work at the local gasworks wearing short trousers. But that's a story for another day. One spoken sentence in England at that time was enough to place you geographically and socially. You were defined by your accent and your vocabulary, and while those class lines may have been invisible, they were immutable and omnipresent. My parents were born in London, in Greenwich, which was not then the trendy place it is now, and they only had to open their mouths, the listener, to assume a long line of things about them. They left school and went straight to work. My mother was expected to give my grandmother housekeeping as soon as she started earning. But it didn't take her long to realize that the way she spoke would bar her from the better paying jobs. So she decided to change her accent. She would go home every night and practice trying to sound like a BBC announcer. It was hard. She once told me that she would have to run through the sentence she wanted to say in her mind before she said it out loud, so it came out right. I once asked her, how was that for you? Was it like losing something or gaining something? Her reply was characteristically pragmatic. She said, I didn't think about it in those terms. I just did what was necessary. And soon enough, more and better opportunities did come along. But even then, after she met and married my father and my brother and I came along, money was tight. My father worked in non-residential construction, farm buildings and the like. And during the school holidays, if my mother was working, my brother and I would drive with him in between the various jobs he was bidding. One day I remember, I must have been 7 or 8, and we were going through a country town past green lawns that seemed to go on as far as the eye could see, with old ivy-covered Gothic buildings in the distance and boys walking around in school uniform. "What's this place, Dad?" I asked him. And I remember his reply to this day. He said, "That's where rich people send their sons to go to school. Don't get your hopes up. It's not for people like us." A couple of years passed and I began to show a little musical talent, and I won a place to sing in the cathedral choir in Chichester. This meant living away from home, private school. I suspect my socialist grandfather, the one that went to work in short trousers, thought my parents were class traitors. But he was proud of me, and he respected my parents' decision that I should have more opportunities than they had had. By the time I arrived at the school, of course I had completely forgotten my father's comment, but I do remember the awkwardness of parents' weekends. My friends, mothers and fathers would show up in their Bentleys and Jaguars and stay in the expensive hotels. My parents bought a second-hand tent, stuck it in the back of their old jalopy, and pitched in a field 2 miles out of town. But the worst time was when I heard somebody say to my father, "We're staying at the Anchor Hotel. Where are you staying?" Far from leaving an embarrassed silence, quick as a flash, my father said in his best BBC accent, "Oh, we're out of the country somewhere." I don't remember the name. My wife made the arrangements. Looking back on it, I like to think that the person who asked the question was just trying to be friendly and was oblivious to the panic my father must have been feeling. But I recognized that panic because I lived with that every day. Now, I don't want to overstate it. 98% of the time, I was just a normal boy doing regular boy things. Everyone sings in the cathedral every day and 3 times on Sundays, right? I didn't give the differences much thought, but every now and then, something would come up that would remind you. A friend taking an expensive holiday, and I had to come up with an excuse for why I couldn't accept his invitation. Not knowing how to tie a bow tie, or mispronouncing a word, because that was how it was said at home. So even at the age of 13, I was deeply aware of the multi-layered complexities of the concept of belonging. On one level, I belonged at that school. I had won my place by competitive audition. I was near the top of my class. I was head chorister, and I had just won a scholarship to study at a specialist music high school. Again, a private school. But on another level, I didn't belong. In my father's phrase, it wasn't for people like us, or as my grandfather would have said, it's for the toffs. The upper class, a closed system, and I wasn't supposed to be part of it. It wasn't until I had been at the new high school a couple of years before I learned to navigate between those 2 different kinds of belonging. To value who I was rather than who I wasn't. To value my family roots, not the family connections I didn't have. And to choose my friends depending on what side of that equation they came down. And that private high school, it was the one I had looked at so enviously as an 8-year-old. And far from not being for people like me, I rocked it.
Thank you, Sandra. Our next storyteller is a 15-year-old high school student, right here in Lexington. It's a sophomore. He's the captain of a high school ethical reasoning team. I didn't even know we had one, but I'm glad we do, because we can use a bit more ethical reasoning in our country at this moment. He says that he decided to tell his story because he wanted to share a truth that was his, and he wanted to hear the truths of other people as well. What's in the name? We'll find out.
I'm here to talk about my name. It's an Indian name, and any Indian or non-American in the audience would understand what I'm about to say. My name is Akshay, but it's also Akshay. There are two ways it's pronounced, and one way it is spelled. You can pronounce it Akshay, like the majority of people who know me, or you can pronounce it Akshay, like my close family members. I used to think of it as one public name and one secret. I, for a point in time, was actually scared of hearing it outside. In my mind, it was bad enough having a name that deviated this much from the norm. To pronounce it apart from normal pronunciation was even worse. It was another way to push me apart from the rest, so I buried the other name deep down, only to be used with family. Today, I realize that two names are an integral part of who I am. It's this duality that permeates my entire life. Indian, but not entirely Indian, and American, but not entirely American. My parents tell me to claim that I'm American, that I'm entitled to the same basic rights as any other citizen. My Indian family tells me to claim my Indian heritage, and to say my prayers proudly. In the midst of this storm of identity sits me, tuning out the war cries of India versus America, and going numb to an endless barrage of information that wants to claim me for one or the other side. As a teenager, I'm still trying to figure out who I am and who I want to be. Should I be Indian and renounce my American identity of eating school lunches and hanging out with friends until late? Or should I be American and erase centuries of Indian heritage with the rich culture, mysticism, and 3 languages that come with it? Should I settle for a single middle path, one that takes both sides and makes the best out of both worlds, one where I go to hang out with friends in the night and call my old grandmother in the morning, right before she goes to bed, and ask her how her day was, and how her other Indian grandmother friends in her apartment complex were, and whether or not she prayed for us before she went to bed, because I definitely prayed for her before I went to school. Today I realize I don't want some middle path that loses either of those. I want my 2 names. It's an integral part of who I am and who I want to be. Now, many in the audience would be wondering how you should pronounce my name, whether you should pronounce it Akshay or Akshay. And the answer is that there is no one answer. I'm learning to hear both, to welcome both, and to be grateful for both. I belong where I have 2 names. So I would honestly prefer you choose what you want to call me. Thank you.
Nate Ramsey.
Many of you will recognize this song from the 1970s show Pippin. There was a revival of it, and this is the revival version. And to me, these lyrics speak very true, because I'm going to go on a limb here and suggest that maybe not everyone here in this building has found their way yet, no matter what your age is. And so I hope that you'll find something meaningful in these lyrics like I do.
Everything has its time. Show me a reason and I'll soon show you a rhyme. Cats fit on the windowsill, children fit in the snow. So why do I feel I don't fit in anywhere I go? Rivers belong where they can ramble. Eagles belong where they can fly.
technology, nonprofit leadership, and teaching both in New York and the Hudson Valley. Deb has been co-writing here a curriculum entitled Dismantling Racism in Our Town, and this is her first storytelling debut. So please welcome Deborah Jacoby Twig.
I was 7 years old in 1964, and my life in Trout Lake was idyllic. Trout Lake is a little town nestled in the southwest corner of southwest Washington State, the mountains and forests of that area. When my family arrived there, it was our fourth move in the first 4 years of my life. But then we stayed there 3 years, and I got to put down roots and own it as my truest home. It was in Trout Lake that I made my first friends, Barbie and Juanetta, sisters who lived 2 doors over. Our house was an old white house, and our school housed 12 grades under one roof. My father preached every Sunday in the church across the street. Nearby, north of town, dominating the landscape, was majestic Mount Adams, snow-capped all year round, solid and reassuring, watching over us all. Trout Lake was perfect. It would be mine forever. It was where I belonged. But then one afternoon, riding home on the school bus, sitting side by side, Barbie turned to me and said, "You're moving away." "What? I'm not going anywhere." "No, you're leaving. My mommy told me so." Her mommy? Confusion and fear flooded my whole being. When the school bus door opened, I ran home all the way, burst through the door crying. "What's this about?" my mother asked, concerned. "Barbie said we're moving," I wailed, knowing she would take me in her arms and say it wasn't so. Well, the look on my mother's face was one of shock and dismay, but not denial. "Go get your brothers," she said quietly. "I want to tell you something altogether." What Barbie said was true. Not long after that, we moved away. We drove a full day's drive northeast to Sandpoint, Idaho. I never found out why. Barbie's mother knew my dad had a new job before he got to announce it. I think it had something to do with party telephone lines, which was the only way you could talk on the phone there. But Sandpoint was a different story. Sandpoint was huge. It had 5,000 people. It had paved streets, private phone lines. So suddenly I didn't know everybody anymore. Everybody didn't know everybody else either. I felt lost and alone. And for the first time in my life, I felt singled out too, and not in a good way, for being a preacher's kid. Like, sometimes I'd walk up to a group of kids and they'd stop talking and not tell me what was going on. Or somebody'd say a swear word and then they'd apologize to me, but not anybody else. There were 3 boys who actively bullied me. I missed the Trout Lake way, where my identity and inclusion just went without saying. But eventually, I made some good new friends and settled in and adjusted to life in Idaho. 7 years later, when my family moved to South Dakota, I took that in stride. And after high school in South Dakota, I went to college in Illinois. And after graduation from college, I went to New Jersey because my family moved there while I was away. In New Jersey, I went to graduate school and studied housing and city planning. And I decided I would take that knowledge to New York City and try to tackle the crisis of homelessness. "Why homelessness?" asked a guy in a job interview at the city housing department. I didn't know. I hadn't thought about my motivation. "I've kind of felt homeless my whole life," I told him. "So I guess I want to help other people who really are." He hired me, and I moved to New York City, joining 7 million strangers, not a single one of whom knew that I was Reverend Twig's daughter. Years passed. Another degree, a second career, a family, addresses in New York's Hudson Valley, and now Lexington. My life felt like a book of unrelated short stories filled with people who were compartmentalized by time and distance. For decades, in my dreams at night, they all knew each other. They'd all get together and party and have adventures and couple up and marry each other and even have children. I'd feel so happy and complete. And then I'd wake up. Oh, they're all in separate chapters again, belonging to me, but not to each other. I craved a kind of oneness of belonging. Facebook came along, and suddenly at warp speed, my dreams became reality. I found my friends from New York and New Jersey, from college in Chicagoland, from high school on the prairie, from grade school and junior high in Idaho. There they all were, in up-to-date photographs with adult children and grandchildren and gray hair, and they were reading and liking each other's posts. Everybody except Barbie and Winetta from Trout Lake. They were harder to find. It took some research, but I found them too eventually. And before I knew it, we were Facebook messaging each other back and forth, bridging the years between us. Studying their photographs, I could see in their aging faces the children I remembered. And reading their words, their personalities came back to me too. Juanetta, the quiet, reflective one, she's a massage therapist living not far from Trout Lake. Barbie, the vivacious extrovert, adores her grandchildren and enjoys three-wheel motorcycle outings in Oregon with her husband. It's called a slingshot, she messaged me. If I come back for a visit, she'll give me a ride. They are who they always were, and somehow finding these last long friends gives back to me who I always was too. Inches from my computer sits a framed photograph of our old house in Trout Lake, my home of homes. And next to that, on my computer screen, all the people from my life gather together in one virtual space. I know that lately, Facebook has become a platform of dubious political allegiances that some feel compelled to abandon in protest. Well, I get it, but I can't quit it. I lost so many people for such a long time. I can't give them up now. Belonging is too important. Thank you.
Our last storyteller, before we go to intermission, describes himself as being in the early stages of failing to retire. But for the previous 35 years, he has balanced two roles, one as a faculty member of Harvard's Graduate School of Education, and the other as the executive director of the Center for Applied Special Technology, CAST, which is a not-for-profit R&D organization devoted to improving education for disabled children. He also says he's married to the lovely Ruth Rose. I will also add wonderfully patient Ruth Rose. Will you please welcome to the stage our founder and director of Voices on the Green, Mr. David.
It's a lot easier backstage. When the instructor said that he had finished grading the hour exams and would be passing them out at the end of class, dread came over me. And it was justified. When I got my blue book, there was a big F on the front cover. I was a freshman at Harvard College, and I could already see a pattern. I'd passed in 5 papers, and they all had been returned ungraded, and they were said in some way that they were not up to Harvard standards, and they did not deserve a grade at all. There were other indications that I didn't belong here. One of them was the freshman across the hall had already written 2 research papers on puffins before he came to college. And I didn't even know what puffins were. And I was very proud to have a Barbra Streisand album, which was brand new. And I showed it to my roommate, and he said, "Oh yeah, she's great. I dated her in high school." The grades and the hour exam, though, shook me deeply. And I realized that I was in trouble. So I made an appointment with my freshman advisor. What was remarkable, just a complete chance, was that my freshman advisor was the dean of Harvard College. So he welcomed me to his office, and I was surprised he seemed to know who I was. And he said, "So you're from Turner, Maine. I've never been to Turner, Maine, and we've never had anybody apply to Harvard from Turner, Maine. What's it like?" And I explained it was a farming community, and not unlike Deborah's community, very small. My high school graduating class only had 33 people. And it was not certainly a place for college preparatory. Almost no kids went to college. And only a few had ever gone out of state. And my achievement scores were pretty awful, in the 400s and 500s. So it wasn't really a college kind of town, I guess I said to him. And he said, "So why did you apply?" And I said, "Well, my sister made me." And my sister, who's here today, had actually been one of the few people that had left Turner to go out of state to college. And she saw this bigger world out there. And she cared about me and wanted the very best for me. And so she came home from college and she said, "I want you to apply to Harvard." And I said, "Well, that's ridiculous. I wouldn't get in. And it costs $10 to apply and all of that." And she said, "I'll pay the application fee if you apply." And so thanks to my sister, I applied and got in. And he said then, "Why are you here today?" And then I explained about the Blue Book and the failed papers and Barbara Streisand and said, I just don't belong here. And what I'd like to do is on Thanksgiving vacation, go home and just not come back. And he raised his finger to stop me. And this is one of the kind of powerful moments in my life. And he said, "David, I'm the dean of Harvard University. I'm also the head of the admissions committee. If anybody knows who belongs at Harvard, I do. We accepted you because we wanted you here. Now it's obviously going to take a lot of work from both of us, so why don't we get started?" So then he says, "Now who graded your exam?" And I said, "Bill Evans." And he said, "Oh yeah, an instructor." Okay, so he goes, can you get me Bill Evans in the psych department? So, right. And he says, "Hi, Bill, I'm sorry that we've never met. This is Dean Monroe calling." And this is, of course, you can imagine this young assistant professor who's like, "What the heck is the dean calling me about?" And he said, "I have something important I want to talk to you about. I have one of your students, David Rose, who's here, and he flunked your exam. I want to say that he's very important to me, and it's important to me that he does well here, and I'm going to need you to be helping him. Are we on the same page?" And he did some more things, but as I was walking back to my dorm, I still didn't feel I belonged at Harvard, but I did feel I'm going to pass this course. I assumed he figured that my father had given a swimming pool or something. And anyway, I was never a great student even after that, but I did graduate. 2 years later, let me get my clicker. Do I have it here? Can you click ahead for me? 2 years later, Dean Monroe, before I graduated, left Harvard entirely. Just a little while ago, I looked up, when I was preparing for this, I looked up his obituary just to see if I could find it. It was actually one of the big obituaries in the New York Times when he died. And just stay there 1 second, Thomas. I want to read the headline. "John U. Monroe, 89, dies. Left Harvard to follow ideals." Let me read you the first line of the obit. Next slide. "John U. Monroe, a white educator who gave up one of the most prominent jobs in academia, Dean of Harvard College, to take a low-level, low-paying, administrative and teaching job with an impoverished black college in Alabama, died on Friday in Laverne, California. He was 89. And everybody thought, what a charismatic thing to do. It was a shock when he left Harvard. And they thought, he'll do this for a couple of years and he'll come back and he'll be the president of the university. He actually never came back. He taught at that impoverished school for 11 years, and then he only changed because he went to a school that was in more trouble. And he stayed in Alabama teaching very underprivileged kids for the rest of his career. I love it that the New York Times recognized what an unbelievable thing that was. So this is a man who knew how to live by his values. 50 years later, I was unaccountably still at Harvard. I was teaching at the School of Education, and I was giving a tour for a bunch of educational leaders from Sweden. And at the end of the institute, they asked me, could you give a tour, of Harvard? I rarely did that, but I decided to do it. And it was kind of my own personal tour. But anyway, I passed University Hall, where Dean Monroe's office was. And I stopped, and I told him the story I just told you. But in the middle of it, I had an epiphany. I realized that I had misunderstood completely where he was at that moment. And that is to say that Dean Monroe had been the key person to diversify Harvard, to push it and force it, to, in fact, invite and welcome people who were not traditionally coming to Harvard. People from inner cities in Alabama. People from rural towns, like Turner, Maine. But being more of an educator than administrator, he knew it wasn't enough for Harvard to just admit people. It had to give them the help and support and the power they needed. And you needed to start it well. So he did it himself. He said, I will take the students that we know are going to have trouble. I will be their freshman advisor. I was Dean Monroe's test case for living his values before he tried it out in the much bigger world. As I stood on those steps, I want to read this because I'm afraid I'm going to get too emotional. As I stood on those steps, telling the story I just told you, but now with this new understanding of exactly what had happened, I was overcome with emotion, with a deep sense of belonging. It wasn't that I felt I belonged at Harvard. I had never really felt that I belonged at Harvard, even though I'd been there for 50 years. But I belonged right there, standing in the shadow of Dean Monroe's office, hosting those educators from Sweden. It felt great.
Have you enjoyed this first half of Personal Journey of Water? You can help us to continue this. We need input. When we go back and plan, we're always looking for themes, and so we can use input to help us create the next shows. We need storytellers, expert speakers, themes for next year. We need organizations we can partner with. And right now we have bookmarks for you. If you look at the back of the pews, you'll see something that looks like this. And on the back of those bookmarks, you will see that it says, yes, I have a story, please contact me. I do not have a story, but I know someone who does. Or, I'm still thinking, could we talk it over? Yes, we can do that. What we'd like you to do is to check off one of those. Also put your name there, maybe a phone number or email. And if you want to take this with you or you're uncomfortable doing that, perhaps you can see there are emails on the bottom. You can send us this information. And we'd like to take that into our planning session. So if you look over to the right, Deb Lapidus, waving her hand right there. She has... And Suzanne also. You have pencils? Suzanne has pencils?
Yes.
Okay, Suzanne has pencils, and Deb also has pencils and also has the card. So if you would do us a favor and fill those out, you can do that now, you can do it during also intermission. Please, when you exit for intermission, if you could not go over on this side because there's a lot of stuff that can trip people, we'd like you to go up the center and around to the left of the, or your right of the church. and back through here we'll have things for you. So, thank you all very much. We'll be back with the second half with more stories and more singing. Have a good time. Second half of Voices on the Green. Once again, did you enjoy the first half? Great. And you remember that we do need your help in order for us to do more programming. And we do have some extra bookmarks. If you look over to the left, to my left, Deb has more, and also Suzanne has more. So please grab one and be filled out before you leave tonight. Or take it with you, and please report to us whatever it is that you might be able to help us out with as far as getting more and more programming here at Voices on the Green. So, next up, first we have a storyteller. And as many great themes happen, it opens with a woman. This next person who's coming up is a mom and wife and physician, and I'm sure she'll tell you that that mom and wife is a lot tougher than the physician part. She lives here in Lexington, and she has 3 wonderful children, one of whom we heard this evening, Akshay. So if you will please welcome to the stage, Niti Mishra Jha.
I realized recently that I most feel the sense of belonging while I'm washing dishes. It was a beautiful summer evening, and we had our close friends, Sarah and Karen, along with their families, over for a potluck dinner. As always, to set the table for dinner in my house, I have to first remove the things that are lying on the table. I removed the piles of unopened mail, school paperwork, books that I've read, and books that I hope to read. Everything that's always just lying there. Once I removed everything, Sarah and Karen helped me bring the food. We were having vegetarian tacos, chicken tacos, salads, fruits, and a chocolate ganache cake. While helping our children make their tacos, we chatted about work, school, and all the other things we want and hope to do in our lives. After dinner, Karen started cleaning up the table, and Sarah started doing the dishes in my kitchen. I told her, "You don't need to do the dishes." Sarah turned to me and said, "I do dishes every single day for my family. I think of you as my family, and I can do this for you too." What she said touched my soul. At that moment, I felt that I really belonged here. I came to Lexington in 2013. Prior to that, I hadn't lived in the same place ever for more than 5 years. Growing up, when I lived with my parents, we moved every 3 to 5 years for my dad's job. I left home at the age of 18 to go to college in India, then grad school in Tennessee, and then residency and work took me to New York City. All these years, I was so busy studying, working, training, getting married, having my 3 wonderful children. I never had even a fleeting moment to pause and reflect back on my sense of belonging, where I belonged, if I belonged, and did I even want to belong in any of those places? I was born and raised in India, in a family of very hardworking middle-class parents. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, very quiet and religious, working at home all the time, taking care of her 3 children. My dad was an engineer who worked for the government. He worked, studied, traveled, and meditated. I didn't agree with any of the things that my parents did for me, and I always resisted everything they recommended. I often felt that they were clueless about what was right for me and what was important for me. Something else that's very significant for my story here is that my dad introduced me to yoga and meditation when I was 5 years old. I used to be so furious about wasting my time meditating. I thought I did not belong there at the age of 12 when we went to a meditation retreat near Varanasi in India for a family vacation. The longest 5 minutes of my life at that time were when I was asked to sit on the banks of River Ganges and just look at the water flowing. Sitting on that river bank among hundreds of people looking at the river, I remember the gritty sensation of sand in my clenched fists. And I remember wishing I could run far away. I remember the sounds of silence, water hitting the rocks, hundreds of people breathing, birds chirping, and me silently yelling in my mind, "Stop wasting my time! I don't belong here!" I never really yelled, because that would have just prolonged my agony. It was so much easier to just get it over with. So I started meditating just to get it over with, to check off on the list of things that I was doing for my parents, so that I could negotiate with them for the other things that I really wanted to do. What I didn't realize was that over the years, meditation became an inseparable part of me. In its own way, my childhood practice of meditation taught me to appreciate the simple moments and the intricacies of daily life, to acknowledge and appreciate everything and anything. It taught me to appreciate doing the dishes. At that moment near the sink with Sarah and the dishwashing, I felt that I really belonged here. These are the people with whom my family will always belong. Belongingness to me is when you can go to a kitchen that's not yours and clean the dishes. When you clean your friend's table after dinner. When you take the leftover food from the serving dishes into smaller containers, open the fridge and put the food in, and there's no judgment. I know I'm in the inner circle of friends at my friend's house when I know where the containers are to keep the leftover food. I belong when I laugh, when just like in my house, I can't find the lids of any of the containers. I belong where I can open the kitchen cabinets looking for the plates. I belong when I can ring someone's doorbell without a prior appointment. I belong with people for whom I don't need to clean my living room before they come and visit. I belong with people with whom I can wash the dishes. Thank you. Thank you.
To bring song back into this space and to lead us, will you please welcome me, Pastor?
Surely you all know this song. So please, do not be shy. I would love for all of us to sing this together. The lyrics are on the screen if you read them. This is Country Roads by John Denver.
Older than the trees, younger than the mountains.
You know, it's really difficult to get a black man to sing a song about West Virginia, but every time this song comes on, man, I'm like, yo, it's a beautiful time. Our next storyteller is an associate professor of education at LaSalle University and an instructor at Harvard. She received her PhD in special education from UC Berkeley and San Francisco State, and she is happily settled right here in our town of Lexington. Please welcome Liz Hartley.
All right. I immediately knew something was wrong when they showed me my future classroom. It was dark and empty. It looked more like a waiting room than a place where you'd educate kids. Besides a few desks, a bookshelf, a small used couch in the corner, there were none of the things that you would expect to see, like books or manipulatives or teaching materials. On a table in the corner, there were two lonely plastic bins, one filled with nuts and bolts, and the other filled with pegs and pegboards. My assigned mentor teacher told me that these were the teaching materials for my kids, who were, in her words, very, very low. Oh man, I thought, this is not good. She went on to warn me that one of my students, Clayton, was especially low because of his severe behavioral and intellectual impairments. He preferred to be left alone, she said, but I should try my hardest to get him off the couch, and one day he should put the nut on the bolt, and then the next day he should take all the nuts off the bolts. Same with the pegs and the pegboards. One day peg inboard, next day peg out of board. If Clayton could maintain this simple skill, he might get a job in a factory one day. I tried to put on a brave face and hide my disappointment, but my heart broke. How could this teacher have such low expectations for a student? And how could this woman be my mentor and a teacher at a school for the blind? In the months preceding this interaction, I had decided to move from Boston to San Francisco. And my life in Boston was very comfortable. I had great friends, I had a wonderful family, and I was living in a city I absolutely loved. I remember my friend Heidi saying, "You cannot leave Boston. You are literally the biggest masshole I know." And she was kind of right. I was a Red Sox hat-wearing, Dunkin' Donuts drinking local. But I had just finished my graduate degree in teaching, and I craved a new challenge. So when I heard that there was a school for the blind in California that was looking for a teacher for their teenagers, my dream job, I knew I had to give it a shot and go west. On the first day of school, Clayton, here he is, sauntered into my classroom with a big smile on his face. He was a stocky teenager, and he loved alternative music and a good joke. At first, he hid out on the couch and was very, very anxious that I would make him do anything. But by the end of the first month, I found the secret to unlock teaching him. All he needed was a consistent routine, asking him to help me versus telling him what to do, and a once-a-week trip to McDonald's to get French fries. And it turns out he wasn't the only one who was anxious. I struggled to get my life in San Francisco settled, to find new friends, to find an apartment, to find out what one does on the weekend when you don't have easy access to local Red Sox games on TV. I remember going to school and every Monday being relieved to see Clayton come through that door. He would come into my classroom and say, "Hi, Liz, are we going to McDonald's?" "Sure, Clayton, as long as you can help me out in class today." "Okay," he'd reply with glee. And he did help me out in class quite a lot. He helped me make snack, run morning meeting. He even helped me pick out a lot of our field trip locations, which were often near McDonald's. There was a lot of learning and there was a lot of joy. Our classroom was a refuge from the long stares and low expectations of other teachers in the school, unfortunately. They haunted us as we'd walk around campus. One teacher told me with certainty that Clayton wasn't allowed a cane or lessons on how to use it, because he might hit us with it. How could a teen with no usable vision not have a cane so that he could get around independently? I ignored her, and I gave him a cane anyways, and he never hit me. A phys ed teacher told me that Clayton wasn't allowed in the pool, his favorite place to be on campus, because another teacher thought he had once peed in the pool. Who hasn't peed in that pool? I went swimming in the pool with him, right next to him, and I peed in a silent protest. An especially nosy teacher pulled me aside to say I was doing wonderful work. Finally, I thought, she sees his potential. I'm starting to change minds here. But then, in the next breath, she told me that if I kept working hard, next year I might get a better class. Better class? What she really meant was a class without Clayton. I remember thinking what I really need are some better colleagues. You might be getting the sense that I kind of liked the fight. It's true, I did. It was me and Clayton against these uninformed naysayers. Good guys versus bad guys. Red Sox versus Yankees. It was so clear-cut to me that we were right, and they were all wrong. Here we are at a school for children with visual impairments and blindness, and Clayton was very much blind, and he was progressing and learning. In 1 year, he went from anxious, couch surfing, nuts and bolts, pegs and pegboards, to a motivated student who could help me run my classroom bake sale, using the proceeds, of course, to independently buy French fries at McDonald's. How dare they deny him the education he deserved? In late spring, my first year of teaching, an administrator told me that she wanted to send Clayton back to his local school district because he didn't have a future at the school. I began to see what was going on with different eyes. I wasn't changing minds, and I probably would never. My work, my students, our progress, it didn't matter. I was resigned to find another job with like-minded professionals who got me, respected me. They'd understand what I was doing. But if I'm honest, I was also afraid. I was fighting this battle quietly in my head because I was deeply scared to speak up for what I knew what was right. On the last day of school, I received this email from Clayton's mom. I'm going to read it to you. She wrote, "Liz, I can't thank you enough for all you've done for Clayton. This is his best year ever, and it's because of you. Unlike all the other so-called professionals, you looked beyond the issues and was able to see Clayton's potential. The last few years have been so discouraging. It was as though they had given up on Clayton. You know how it was when you got there, no cane, no swimming, isolation. I don't have to explain. Everyone pretty much stayed away from him. Well, you and Clayton showed them what he's capable of. Thank you for having faith in him, encouraging him, your patience. I thank you for being able to see that Clayton is just like other kids. Sincerely, Penny." For the next 5 years, I kept a printout of this email in my wallet as a reminder that I can create classrooms where kids like Clayton find they belong. And in that classroom with Clayton, I found where I belonged. Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, Voices on the Green, we like to partner with a community organization, someone who we feel is doing really, really good work here in Lexington, and always reminding us, as Lincoln said, of the better angels of our nature. Tonight we have partnered with LexRap, which is the Lexington Refugee Assistance Program, which is an organization dedicated to those seeking settlement here in the United States. To tell us a bit more about the organization and to introduce our last reader is the director of LexRap, Marion Osborne.
You people are too much. So LexRap started with a simple email. First of all, thank you. And thank you for Voices for recognizing us and for sharing with us. Thank you for First Parish. Thank you for all being here. LexRap started with an email to the Lexington listserv saying, from me saying, I can take an Assyrian family. Who's with me? And 10 people responded, I have an extra bedroom, I'm with you. And 20 people responded, how can I help? And we started meeting. And along the way, belonging is a really perfect theme. Along the way, we had a big discussion about whether or not we were going to be a group that helped the most needy, because there are so many people who find themselves in crisis and need help. And we made a decision that we were going to be with families and individuals who we get involved with for the long run. And an example was, until these children are in college, I won't be done. And I didn't get a family. We turned out we couldn't go to the airport and pick up a Syrian family. And one time, some of you have heard Osama called me and said, there's a new doctor in town, English is better than mine, he's yours. And so I had someone. And this was Ziad. And then Ziad found Jawad. And now I had 2 doctors. And to talk about belonging, we were recently at a hand-in-hand dinner, and my son was there, and I overheard Jawad talking to someone, and he said, you see that guy with the beard? That's her son. But Ziad and I are her other sons. And we belong. And we really reach out, tutor, mentor, connect, and help people in this new country that's theirs. And they're our neighbors. And, you know, it is just amazing, the community that LexRap has built with the help of everybody. So, Jawad.
Hello, everybody. I was born in Iraq. I belonged in Iraq. All the pieces of the puzzle we call life were in their place in Iraq. My family, my future, and my view of the greater world all fit on that puzzle. All the pieces of the puzzle were in a place and were familiar to me. I belonged. If you ask how long my family has been in Iraq, I would probably say forever. It is so odd to me that people in the United States know when their parents or their grandparents came here and where they came from. Because in Iraq, we do not come from another place. We come from Iraq. But the puzzle of life with all the pieces neatly in place got broken apart. Not only did the puzzle mess up, but some of the pieces got lost. In Iraq, I lost my belief that we could put things back together. I grew up when things were starting to come apart. I was not an activist, not a political. Yet, twice I found myself with a gun to my head. Also, my 15-year-old cousin got killed, and my dear neighbor was shot on his doorstep just for saying his opinion. Sad and heartbreaking. I was fortunate. I was able to attend medical school in Egypt and be out of the country. While in school, I met my future wife, beautiful Jamila, who is from Syria, by the way, another war-torn country. Some of my family had been granted refugee status and lived in the US. Soon after my marriage, I was granted a visa to visit the US. Even though my wife could not travel with me on that visa, we decided that I should go and try my best to bring her to the US. I had to leave my new wife in Egypt. Yes, I did that because my home in Iraq was no longer where I belong. When I came here, I started in California, spent some time in New York, but somehow ended up in Massachusetts. I applied for asylum. My case took me more than 2 years. Meanwhile, my wife had to return to Syria as nobody left for her in Egypt after her father died there. I worried. As soon as my asylum was granted, I filed for her to get permission to join me. Another period of waiting and worrying began. I moved from Worcester to Lynn when I met my roommate, Ziad, another Iraqi doctor. Both of us scraped by financially while we studied for the medical exams needed to become licensed doctors in the US. Ziad had become connected to Lexington Refugee Assistance Program, and they found us a small apartment with the Worth family in Bedford. We slept in twin beds in a shared room, but we could study. It was so much quieter than Lynn. Ziad says the best place in America must be right here. Then, after 2 years or more of being in the US, I received the good news that Jamila could join me. I knew I must go get her. I filed for her, I filed a petition, and then after the petition, it took us for about like another 9 months or so. So in total, it was about 3 years. 3 years of separation. After the 3 years of separation, I went to get my wife. My friends here were very worried about me traveling to the Middle East. Jamila couldn't cross the border into Lebanon unless she had $2,000 US on her person. But you can't get US dollars in Syria. Another obstacle. Anyway, Lebanese taxi drivers keep an envelope under their seat and go into Syria and pick up a passenger and then hand them the envelope to cross the border. Of course, the taxi ride costs a premium. As each obstacle was crossed, I emailed back home to the US. Yes, the US had become home for me. I am the one who first called LexRap a tribe. We come from Iraq, Syria, Uganda, Egypt, Rwanda, and of course, the mismatch of Americans who come from all over. We are Muslim, Sunni, and Shia, and don't worry about that. We are Jewish, Christians, and Unitarian. I haven't figured that one out yet. Believe me, we are in each other's lives. When Jamila and I arrived in Boston, we had to go through Homeland Security. The man looked at me and then at Jamila's passport. He said, "You are from Iraq and she is from Syria." I nodded. He said, "So, you have a mixed marriage?" I was puzzled, and he was smiling. Then he said, "At least, are you both Sunni or Shia?" I said, "Oh my God, I am Muslim Shia, and she is Muslim Sunni. But our children will be American." He said, "Welcome to the United States." In January, our daughter Nadia was born. She has brought us so much joy and love. Now, all the pieces of the puzzle are here. We are so happy to be living here in Lexington, surrounded by people who make us feel like we belong. Now, I feel that I have come home again. Thank you.
Before I sing that last song, I just want to say thank you to Voices on the Green for having me. This has been such a pleasure being here, so thank you for including me here. Are you guys having fun tonight? This is so fabulous. How many of you have heard, or how many of you have seen the musical Dear Evan Hansen? Just a small amount of you. That's, I really encourage you to see this show. It's really hard to get a ticket. It's one of the hottest tickets. I would say it's one of the best musical theater shows in the last decade, for sure. It is so fabulous and has a wonderful message of belonging. Again, it takes place in a high school, and it's really about finding where you belong. And so this last song I'm going to sing, it's called You Will Be Found. But the thing is, I'm totally going to need your help because it's actually an ensemble song. This is how they close out Act 1 in the show. So, Country Roads was actually an audition. You guys didn't know that. And you passed. But that was about 60%. I would like to bump that up to about 98%. So, I would invite you guys to sing along nice and loudly. For those of you who don't know the song, I'm going to teach you the chorus part here. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sing the first section once, and then I'm going to sing it in 2 chunks, and I'll have you guys repeat after me. So this is generally how it sounds. Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, and when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So it's pretty simple. So repeat after me. I'm going to do the first half of that. Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you. All right, your guys' turn. Ready? Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you. Okay. And now the next part. Yes, I appreciate your enthusiasm. That's what we need, folks. That's what we need. And when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. Repeat after me. And when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So one more time. The first section goes, sing it with me. Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, very similarly. So let the sun come streaming in, 'cause you'll reach up and you'll rise again. Lift your head and look around, you will be found. Let's all do it together. So let the sun come streaming in, 'cause you'll reach up and you'll rise again. Lift your head and look around, you will be found. Okay, that's pretty good. So we're gonna turn up the volume a couple clicks here. So sing with me the whole chorus. One more time, ready? Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, and when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So let the sun come streaming in, 'cause you'll reach up and you'll rise again. Lift your head and look around, you will be found. Okay, that's awesome. I'm so excited for this. The last thing you need to know is that there is a section of the song that says, "You are not alone." And all you gotta do is just repeat after me. You are not alone. You are not alone. Again. You are not alone. You are not alone. Okay, fabulous. Now you guys know the whole song. This is great. So, this is our last song of the evening. So I want you to give it all your energy. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start out the song. I will sing the chorus once through as a solo, and then you guys come in. I'll give you the cue when to come in. Is everyone ready? Yeah. Okay, here we go. Let's do it. Have you ever felt like nobody was there? Have you ever felt forgotten in the middle of nowhere? Have you ever felt that you could disappear? Like you could fall and no one would hear? Well, let that lonely feeling wash away. Maybe there's a reason to believe you'll be okay. 'Cause when you don't feel strong enough to stand, you can reach out your hand. And oh, someone will come running
artists. If you wouldn't mind giving a round of applause, I'm going to call everyone back up to the stage. If you would welcome, again, Simon Andrews, Akshay Jha, Deborah Jacobs Quigg, David Rose, Dee Mishra Jha, Liz Hartman, Dr. Jamar Abdul Rafiq, Marion Boswell. Keep it going for all the folks who helped us keep this together. Like Deborah Pierce, Suzanne Allen, Mr. Maria Steinberg is downstairs, Ann Bugari, Amy Jameson, Bill Victoria upstairs, Ron Madison, Thomas Creepy, Helen Cohen, David Powell, Sarah Manis. And if you would welcome to the stage our minister, Ann Mason.
You filled me with so much hope tonight. In a world that seems to pride itself on separating us from each other, for lifting up hate instead of love, for deciding that I live here and you live there and we're not the same. You have shown us in your stories, in your love, in your finding new ways of belonging that we do belong to each other in a deep and human way, despite our differences, in spite of all of the things that separate us. We are one. I think of the poem of Edwin Markin that says, he drew a circle which shut me out, heretic, lunatic, a thing to flout, but love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took him in. Thank you for being here.